Hey! Today we're going to show one of the bonus sketches for Gravity Falls I did while working on my Gravity Falls tutorial. Welcome to Moovieboy. I am Tom Sorensen, and today we are doing a bonus video off of the Gravity Falls Mystery Shack tutorial. As some of you may have noticed, when I went into the intro of that original video and this one, I actually swapped out this photo, which everyone is familiar with, for this one, which was my own personal sketch. First, let me show you how I built this in Procreate and then composited it into Photoshop and then After Effects. Now it's time for time lapse! Here is our final image in Procreate, and here are all the layers that eventually were made. Let's start with this, our original sketch. I actually did this originally in black, not the blue that you see it now, and as before, just used a basic 6B pencil to do all the sketch work. I worked on the ink layer, and again for inking, I'm just using the lobster squirrel brush that I copied from the Lobster Squirrel YouTube channel. Then it was a matter of starting to do all the colors. And as before in the last tutorial, what I used was the ink layer and clicked on that and then clicked reference. And what that meant was that if I had any color, for example, this kind of yellow, and make sure I'm on the color layer, if I were to drag this color in, it is now constrained or referencing the ink layer on top without messing up the ink layer. And of course, let's do 2 fingers to undo that because I don't want that color. So once we had those colors marked in, then I worked on a shadows layer. Let's turn off the ink to kind of see that a little bit better. And let's just move this aside a little bit. Turn that on and off. No, not double click. And it's just adding some shadows here. This was set to multiply, and I made, and I also brought down the opacity from what was much stronger before on down. And then on the ink layer, since Gravity Falls does color work to its ink layer, I then had the ink colors here. And maybe this would stand up better if I turned off the color and the shadows. All right, so now you can see the areas where line work was colored, especially on Mabel's shirt. Otherwise, if you didn't have that, let's turn all this back on and zoom into something like Mabel's shirt, you end up with a different look. Also here on the braces. Now I needed to focus on the background. So again, 6B pencil, started sketching a background very similar to the actual one. I wanted it to look similar enough to the original Gravity Falls intro piece that it wouldn't necessarily jump out at you unless you paused it and realized, wait, this is a different sketch. So this was just the sketch, and again, then here we can see the ink layer for the background. Then it was a matter of coloring things and wanting to make sure that this didn't get too messed up. Sky, and trees, and grass, and plants, and mushrooms. So by then, that is our background. This was primarily done using, for my painting brush, this jagged brush. I've seen other YouTubers kind of use this for some of their work and have been liking it, so I've just been using it more and more for a more painterly look. And then, of course, you bring our humans back. And now we have almost all of it. But if you notice in the actual image, it has a grunged up old photo look. So I went online, looked around for some more grunge images, and found this. Let's single that one out. See if we can see this. And it was set to hard light. So if we bring this to normal and bring it up, there we go. This was our grunge image. And if we turn everything back on, you'll see the grunge adds just enough dirt and grime to it to give us what we want. Now, if you ever have an image getting way too small, whatever it is, and you don't know how to get it back, a real simple method is just take your two fingers and kind of pinch quickly together, and it springs it back into place. Eventually then, this was just simply flattened all together. So I just went to share, and I think I just shared it as a JPEG, all flattened because I didn't need to separate these layers out for later compositing. Sent that out as a JPEG and then moved it into Photoshop. So now let's go into Photoshop. We originally start with importing this image in. Then I took a screen grab from the original introduction plate, and then it was a matter of masking out everything outside the photo frame, which was done just using the pen tool and also brushes to refine the mask edge around here. Then I drew a shape in place to cover up the corners of the original. I also set an inner glow, which we can show here, which the reason why I didn't use a drop shadow is that the glows will actually work in all directions. It doesn't care about a directionality so that it'll go inside of all sides. And this was just simply set to multiply just to give a shadow. Now the thing is about how these work is that if you have something on top of it set to a clipping, such as my image, if we hold the Option key and click this, as you can see now, besides taking on the clipping path, it actually takes on the effects of the layers underneath. I don't need to recopy these to the layer above. So just by holding down the Option key to turn this hand icon into this, now it takes on any effects you have on the primary layer. So we didn't have to rebuild this whole frame here, and we didn't have to like delicately cut anything out. We just simply laid it over. Now we'll just bring these layers over to After Effects. Here we are back in After Effects. So once we imported the Photoshop into a new composition, I kind of went back and forth on how I wanted to approach it, because as you can see here in this composition, we only have the top two layers. We've got the shape layer, and we've got the new sketch. What I ended up deciding to do in the larger comp is, and of course this is the one that has all the stuff, including our final fake title treatment here. So here is that Photoshop layer moved over from here and brought into this one. And essentially what I did, and let's zoom into tighter on the frames here. I'm going to select this layer and hit the U key to bring up everything that I adjusted. And as you can see here, and actually let's turn off the motion blur for a second. So what I essentially did was I watched the original, let's bring this down to show the original movie file. And let's turn this off. So I'm just watching this play out, and then mapping the same thing on top of it, which since it doesn't change, it probably looks a little confusing. So let's make this, if we go to divide, just so this shows up better between the two, what I simply did was looked at the position, scale, and rotation of the original clip, and then just kept shrinking this one to match. So if this was a final file, you know, obviously this is now too big, and just mapped it out accordingly. So as it moved frame by frame, I would shrink it more, I would move it more, and yeah, it wasn't 100% perfect, but it didn't need to be. Now, of course, the big difference is that there's motion blur as this photo falls into frame. So I just made sure to also have that on my layer. And let's go back to normal. So now I basically had a doppelganger frame on top of it. And I knew that I had matched it if things basically matched up by turning on and off this layer. Very subtle differences as it settles into place, because the photo actually comes in and kind of does a little bounce rotation and then finally settles into place. So I brought this whole thing in. Everything that I mapped out on this doppelganger frame, all I have to do now is tell this one to do the same. And let's turn the soloing off here. So now bringing in this one and pick whipping it to this one, as you can see, set up to the original. Now anything this was set to do, the other one will do. Old and new. Old and new. Now, I hear some of you thinking, wait a second. Yeah, you snuck in this photo and you snuck in this, which I explained in the previous tutorial was actually from a different YouTube channel, how to do this. So some of you are asking, well, what about this? Well, I suppose we could do a tutorial on this as far as how I changed it from the original, but essentially this was just using Photoshop to mask out various pieces and swap in my own secret codes and secret symbols and stuff. So I don't know, if someone really wants to see this, you can mention it to me in the comments, but otherwise this was just meant to be a one frame setup. And then just like Bill Cipher does in the original, he's ghosting for one more frame and then blurs and fades away. And let's rewind that to there. So that is essentially it for this bonus tutorial on Gravity Falls. If you want to see anything else, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thank you very much and come again.